Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 621 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike Eilon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our sixth book came out. It's called I'm So Beautiful, It's Ridiculous, Unleashing and Promoting Strength, Self-Worth, and Real Sisterhood. So go and pick up that book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble today. And our seventh book is going to be coming out later this week. So go and check that out. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring fraternity and sorority leaders together. Fun fact, we love it when our podcast listeners make recommendations for new guests on this show. One of our longtime listeners, Dr. Thea Zunick, said that I absolutely had to speak with Darnell on our show because his story just blew her away. The people have spoken. So today we are going to do just that. Darnell Hardy is a highly respected fitness coach and the founder of Optimize VO2, a metabolic fitness company dedicated to helping individuals achieve peak performance. With over a decade of experience in the fitness industry, Darnell has worked with diverse clientele ranging from everyday individuals seeking to improve their health and fitness to elite athletes competing at the highest levels of CrossFit and Hyrox. Darnell's expertise lies in optimizing metabolic function and aerobic capacity, enabling clients to achieve significant improvements in their pursuits. He is a sought-after speaker and a seminar host. He travels the country sharing his knowledge and insights on metabolic fitness. Darnell is also an aerobic capacity certified. He serves as a subject matter expert at the prestigious Power Monkey Camp, further solidifying their reputation as a leader in the field. Darnell, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, Dr. Mike. Thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure. It's just an honor to have you on the show. I know your story is incredible, your business is incredible. I want to start from the very beginning of your journey. You grew up in St. Louis, and I'm wondering what was that like for you as a kid? And how did those early experiences that you have shape your perspective on things like resilience and survival?
Yeah, growing up in St. Louis, it's interesting just because, it's a city where it has a reputation if you hadn't been there. And so, outside of like just good food and barbecue, it does have a reputation of, just the inner cities, and the city is highly segregated in a sense where, it just kind of like groups throughout the city, and it becomes very obvious if you ever drive through the city what part of the city you're in. So the part of the city that I grew up in was the inner city, north side of St. Louis, right, right by Natural Bridge Kings Highway. The St. Lunatics has a very very popular song with that, and it was like one of them things where when you grow up the way that I grew up, you learn to like lean on family. So to me, this just seems really really normal having like 6 or 7 people in a two-bedroom home. Or in a two-bedroom apartment. And so it was just like literally sleeping with, brothers, sisters, relatives, and things of that nature, like two at the head, two by the, footboard and things like that, just sharing common spaces and things like that. And just, looking back, you realize how amazing your parents were because you lived in a scenario that was like unideal scenarios, but you always felt like you had enough food, you had enough love, you had enough stimulation, you had enough of everything. So you had enough of the things that mattered. But just like looking back, and it was a period of time where all of my cousins had to live with my brother and I because my auntie had like a complication with my cousin, and like now he's in his 30s and he's thriving and things like that. But back when he was born back in 1996, her four girls, because he's the youngest of five, so her four girls and then my mother two boys, we all lived in a two-bedroom apartment while she dealt with that type of complication. And so like shout out to Auntie Sam and Lil Tony for making it through, like it continue to help us in this world. But it was just tough. Yeah, and being in the city, you don't know what you don't know. So like you'll always, it'll be random times where I just see people just like running, and I'm just kind of like, ooh, like what's that? It'll be random times where like the police come, just like flying by. It was a lot of times I'm playing kickball in the back of our apartment complex, and then a police chase like cut through the game. You know what I mean? The guy who's running kind of like jumped his fence, and then the cops would be running fast after him. There's a lot of times as I'm kind of reliving that part of my life. There's particular times where I actually remember coming downstairs in the backyard, and because it's like an apartment complex and like all the buildings share like a common backyard area for the kiddos. And then like in the backyard, a van pulled up, and then a group of guys came out, and then I can see like blood coming from a hand and then a gun in another hand. And this is like all before I'm like 10, 11, 12 years old. And so it's really interesting to like be in an environment like a St. Louis, and especially St. Louis from the reputation that the world might put on it. Like it's a fantastic place to live. I truly believe every place has these little idiosyncrasies that make people fall in love with it, and St. Louis is no different than that. But it's just being like exposed to the things I was exposed to at like such an early age. Like looking back on it, I'm just like, that's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild.
That's definitely wild. That is definitely not the norm. So it's interesting how you just kind of say it matter of factly, like, yeah, this is kind of, what happened. And you had to say no to drugs. You had to say no to violence, peer pressure, all before the age of 11 years old. That's something that many adults will still struggle with. So what do you think helped you to develop the kind of discipline that you have and self-awareness so early in life?
I think like that part is a reality, but it is really tough for me to like live life doing what I think is best and then have it be looked at as something better than someone else, right? Because I just truly believe that everybody's out just making the best decisions that they can make with the information that they do have. And so a lot of times in those stages, I just kind of like, and then it's one of the reasons why like I had one shot in my life. I just recently turned 40 a year ago in 2024, and then I don't drink to this day. And so for my 40th birthday, a lot of the homies was kind of like, hey man, you gotta drink, you're turning 40, you're turning 40. And it's one of them things, and I know I'm talking about my childhood, but I promise you it'll full circle it. But it's like one of them things. I'm just like, well, I just don't do it. And then like I live in California, a very, very recreational state, we'll just say that. Where just like things, and I'm just like, I don't do it. And just because like my association with like alcohol and drugs, is like people got put in jail and people's lives were like messed up because of it, right? And so when I in the city that I grew up in, I'll walk by and then I'll see, drug deals happen. I'll walk by and I'll be in a room where like, one of my favorite movies are like it's like old school movie Menace to Society. And then like at the beginning of the movie, like, Baby Kane just seeing like, a lot of the stuff with Samuel L. Jackson at the card table. And then that was just very, very familiar for me, right? And so again, my association with those things were just kind of like, okay, the adults did that. And then also I seen people and I hear people being like locked up or their life changed for the complete worst or sad things. And so whenever it comes to the time where I need to be experimenting, I was like, well, I just don't necessarily experiment with that because like I've seen enough movies and then I lived in this neighborhood long enough to just kind of know that like that's not a good road to go down. And so like even now, like in the years where like it's legal, and then it's like I don't think it's wrong, and I honestly like I'm definitely, if you do it, like do it. Like I've made it through college, I made it through all this stuff without like drinking, and I've been in the most yeah, in the most crazy scenarios. But like right now, like my association with it, what is being bad, like as a kid, like I just can't break that. So like even like today, it kind of helps well, it influences my choices not to necessarily like partake in said things, just because like again, like people that look like me that like smoke weed, did drugs, things like that, like they got rap sheets, they got strikes on their record, they got like prison time and things of that nature. So I didn't want to be another statistic in that regard. You know what I mean? I want to create a new statistic, and then like right now, for no other reason that like I just can't not think about like, the people that look like me that's been affected because of choices they made whenever it was like taboo to make it. And like now that it's legal, I feel a whole type of way about it. And so that's a topic for another day. But it's just like I've seen so many lives affected in a negative way because of those choices. And then I just want to give myself the best chance. And then like at 10, 11, am I thinking like this? Like absolutely not. But I did have the foresight to just kind of like understand the environment that's around me and just understood that like this led to that, that led to that. And then I didn't think that was in my future.
hmm it's more than just the environment around you. You've also been very open about surviving abuse to yourself and other painful experiences that you had in your childhood. So I'm wondering, how do you begin to process all of that trauma as you got older? And how does that influence your desire to help other people?
Yeah, I think, I think like trauma graduates, like, and especially as you get older, like, and if, because a lot of times when something happens to you specifically, and we all are uniquely made in God's image, like I do truly believe that. But then you think like that scenario is just isolated on you, and so you feel like you're the only person like going through this scenario, that you've kind of been through. And so I think like what I would like highly encourage anyone that's going through anything is that just share it in a safe space. And so it could be with like a therapist, it could be with, a trusted friend. Like sadly, like in my case, it couldn't necessarily like be with family, just because it you kind of like everybody works in patterns. And so like whenever you like get information, you kind of know based on the severity of the information, or just the weight of the information, good or bad, how the reaction would be. And so you have some people that are like highly confrontational, you have some people that are like highly vindictive. And so like if you know that human to be that way, it's like you're just, and as a kid, I couldn't process this, but like as an adult, it's like you're literally just like looking just to tell someone and for them to like take the information and sit with it and not react to it. And then it's really, really tough as a kid, or just as somebody without the resources to like find a space where people can just like take the information so it can be like a shared experience, but then with the information, they won't react. And also not only react, you can trust them not to like spread everything. And so it's definitely like multi-layered and multifaceted. But I think as far when it comes to like just helping others, I just really I just really I really hope that who's ever going through whatever they're going through, just understand that like it's not your fault. Um, that's first and foremost. Like it's just simply not your fault just because it's a saying that like if you know better you'll do better type of deal. And then it's like you don't know, what I mean, like, and especially for like these people and these find themselves in these traumatic experiences, this is all like a first time thing, what I mean. Like I think trauma happens in a series of firsts, and so like as this is happening it's almost like, well, is almost like surreal, like out of body, like, is this really happening to me or am I doing this? Or, like in my case, it was just kind of like, it was, you've always been taught as a kid, to like respect your elders or to like, do this or like do that, just kind of like, it's like a hierarchy, like a chain of command, like almost military style. And so like, the little brother, which I was, has to listen to the older brother. And then, the older brother has to listen to the cousin. Then the cousin has to listen to the uncle. Then the uncle has to listen to, until it gets to like mom or dad, mom or dad, mom and dad, or whatever the structure is. And so it's like always like that hierarchy in a sense. And so then all of a sudden you find yourself like the low man on the totem pole, and then somebody like two things up to say like, hey, like do this or whatever. It's kind of like they innately you just don't understand the information you can say yes or no to. So you just always feel like just because of like, the structure that helps a unit, and especially a family unit, and especially a unit that has to lean on everyone, it helps a unit like survive and be cohesive. But then also it does like that structure does like allow for some sort of like foul play or some sort of like taking advantage of like the hierarchy in a sense. And it again, like looking back on it, I don't like, I definitely don't place the blame on myself anymore. And then like even like, even like the perpetrators, they get like a ton of grace just because like in that moment, like would they make the same decision today? I love to believe they wouldn't, you know what I mean? And so it is kind of like one of them things where I just, yeah, I like with trauma, I just really just hope because I felt like, it was something that I just kept to myself, and especially like being like sexually taken advantage of by like, a male figure in your family is like in the Black community. It's kind of like in the 90s, the last thing you want to be is like a homosexual. Like it was like very, very taboo, in a sense. And so, and then, you will have like God talk or whatever it is, and God would bring up these scenarios like, hey, would you ever blah, 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 blah. And then if you ever did that, like you're this no matter what, no matter what the circumstances. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, no matter what the circumstances are, that was like really, really perplexing to me that, like people that are like my best friends, like they say things like this and I'm just kind of like, you guys have no idea what I've been through. And so it was like one of the moments, or it is one of those moments where it's kind of like, whoa, and just not having a place to just kind of like dump it, just because like again, like now these are my friends or my brothers in a sense. So if I dump it there, then like I think that they think that, like something that I'm not. And then I'm just like, that's not the case. And so like let me just go ahead and keep that in. Let me just go ahead and like keep that buried just because of like the rhetoric around, like just that in the Black community, it just isn't it's not a positive rhetoric. And so then I don't want to be like looked the type of way. I want to be accepted. And I think everybody should just like looking for like acceptance or community or whatever it is. And so like if me keeping this in and me carrying this weight helps me helps me be more accepted in the moment, well, then I'll like keep it in and I'll carry the weight and I'll just take the punch on the chin and I'll just keep going just because, yeah. And so that's kind of, and I just don't want anyone to carry something that they can release longer than they should.
I think that's great advice. And for all the college students that are listening here, you all have a counseling center that I would love for you to take advantage of. Your tuition is going to pay for that counseling center and all the people that are working there. So by all means, take advantage of that. It's not something that I discovered until I was an adult. And like you, I wish that I would have released it earlier, but I didn't. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, all the stigma that surrounds that counseling center. And somehow, if I'm there, I must be broken, right? And if so, another college student sees me there, then that's some kind of negative reflection on me. And so, speaking of college, you went to Missouri State University. I'm wondering, how did you end up choosing Missouri State?
Oh, I chose Missouri State. It became obvious. At first, my first school from high school was this small school in Missouri called Missouri Valley College.
Mhm.
And I played football at Missouri Valley College and I played football for a few years there. And then like as my career ended, I was a music major, which is interesting. That's a story for another day. Um but and something happened where like I just couldn't, I just didn't feel like myself at that school. There was like a series of events that, kind of like happened where I just kind of like I lost a lot of trust in like the people that I supposed to have the most trust in. And so like I was like looking to like switch schools. And so Missouri Valley is a small school, then like up the road a little bit, I guess further west is Kansas City. And then further southwest is Missouri State, and then just like due east is Columbia or Mizzou. And being like everybody kind of knows how state schools go. So like the state schools are just like feeders for like the cities you grew up in. And so like I knew a lot of people from St. Louis at Mizzou and at Missouri State. But I pledged Sigma at Missouri Valley, and then I met a group of Sigma that become some of my best friends. Shout out to Jay, Fu, and T. Um, yeah, and they were at Missouri State. And so whenever I was making those decisions between like Mizzou and Missouri State, it's like I already had, you know, a great network at Missouri State. And so I just went over to Missouri State and then I ended up getting a degree in accounting and just kind of like living out the rest of my college days with like, some of my Greek friends. And so that's how I chose Missouri State. It was the tuition was cheaper and then I just had friends there. And I got off a call earlier today and it was I expressed that I'm at the point in life where I want to do cool things and I want to do things that I'm good at, but also I want to do things, the cool things and things that I'm good at with the people that I love and to be around. And I think that framework actually like drove that decision to go to Missouri State back whenever I made the decision in 2006.
Hmm. So what's special about Phi Beta Sigma fraternity? Why did you choose them over other organizations on campus that you could have joined?
Well, it's interesting because the organizations on the campus that I went to, it was the only like black fraternity there. But
Mm.
we did have like Sigma Nu, we had Phi Delta, we had like a lot of these other fraternities. So like, and then they have fraternity houses and things like that. And like actually one of my like my LB lived in a fraternity like somebody else's fraternity house because they just wanted to bus. I say bus, they wanted to house like just the freshmen just close to the campus, and so the fraternity house served like a dual purpose. And so like I didn't know anything about Greek. Like I grew up without a father. I was the first person to ever go to college, like out of like my immediate family. Um and it was like really bizarre. So I didn't know anything about Greek life. I didn't even know anything about college life. I just thought that like we had these community colleges like Flow Valley and Forest Park, like St. Louis community colleges that like people just like always talked about. So I just assumed that like if I wanted to go to college, I go to like Flow or Forest Park. So being at a 4-year college university, that was new to me. And then also like this Greek life thing was new to me. So I remember walking across campus and then this kid, Derek, I'll never forget him, tall kid, white guy. And he was like, "Hey, do you want to go to this black fraternity thing?" And I was kind of like, okay, and then so it was like an informational, but then I actually found out like it's supposed to be like an interest meeting, but I actually found out that like it was just like not necessarily an interest meeting. It was just like day one type of deal or like day zero, right? So like you guys like what we saying, we'll come back day one, it'll be tomorrow type scenario. And so all of a sudden I just like kind of like was in this intake process through the fraternity, and then it was just kind of like you fast forward 6 weeks 2 days 3 hours later. Not that it's not that it's traumatic at all. And then all of a sudden I'm a Sigma,
Yeah.
which is great just because like it's a process. Like I typically stick to things that I start. And so the fact that I started this, then just kind of like I'll stick through it. And it's one of the best mistakes I ever made in my life, you know. Yeah, and so it was definitely one of the best happen chances I ever made in my life. Because if I don't walk across, if I don't intersect Derek, then I'm not a Sigma. And then fast forward, almost 20 years later, I'm not on this podcast. And
Yeah.
so it is super crazy how like random encounters are not that random. You know what I mean? But that's kind of how I chose Phi Beta Sigma. And then, and how I chose Missouri State because of like the relationship that I had with Phi Beta Sigma. And then that was kind of like, just really drove my decision making back then when I was, 18, 19, 20.
Yeah. Well, everything clearly happens for a reason, Darnell. So here we are. I love it. I love it. But your life has not been easy, I mean, you faced unimaginable loss in life. I mean, you lost your brother, you lost your best friend, you lost your grandparents all within a decade. I'm wondering, how does all of that and all of those experiences change how you see things like conflict and pain and perseverance?
Yeah, I think like I really appreciate this question. I think it's a fantastic question. And then I'm like looking at like my answers and I have a lot of words. I have a lot of words written down. And so it's I definitely I think and I spent a lot of time on the first one because I think the first one like set the foundation on how I dealt with everything like subsequently, right? And so like losing my brother, like typically you don't typically like the parents die first, right? The grandparents die, the parents die, and then your generation dies, and then your kids like outlive you in a sense, right? And so having a scenario where and my mom and our relationship is so much better now, and I'm so appreciative for it. But typically, like we were growing up, is almost like call if and when you need something type of deal. So whenever she calls, it's kind of like make sure you pick up this from the store. Whenever I call, it's kind of like, hey mom, I need you to sign some FAFSA documents. I need you to, like I need some money to make it through the weekend. You know what I mean? It's kind of like very, very just kind of like logistical. And so the fact that like when she called me at like an off time, like my heart like already dropped because like why are you calling me right now? Um and so back when I like fielded that phone call back in May 11th, 2006, it was really it was really impressionable. Just because like my mom doesn't she like we don't know how to do this, right? We don't know how to process emotion. And especially with like something like that, like where she lost her first son, the way that she lost it, and I lost my only brother the way that I lost it. And so like trying to like listen to her, like tell me this, it was just kind of like she couldn't get the words out. And then I just got enough to just kind of like not feel good about the scenario. And so like when that kind of happened, I just remember I remember like after, so I filled the phone call and I'm at college. I'm at Missouri State. And so I hang up the phone and then I literally just like don't know what to do. So I walk over to the gym and then I start to play basketball. And so it was a bunch of people. And then there was kind of like, and they caught the vibe like, hey bro, what's up? I'm like, hey man, I just like lost my bro. I just really like need to hoop. I just really need to just like do something just so I can like have time to like figure out, like to accept the reality of the scenario, and to really just kind of like just kind of like come to grips with it. And so I remember coming home, and then so I remember driving home like the next day, and this was like right at the start of finals week. So I'm like ripping I-44 like 3.5 hours back to St. Louis, then 3.5 hours back for the exam, then 3.5 hours back here, and then 3.5 hours back there. And so I'm just like ripping, the interstate, 7 hours a day essentially. And then I remember the first time I went home, and then as I pulled up, I'm kind of like approaching the door. And then at this time, like obviously like, first cousins, friends, like all the family, like everybody's at the house, like grandparents at the time, everybody's at the house. And so I kind of like walk in and then like I feel death in the driveway. Like it feels heavy. It just feels heavy. Like, "Ugh," and then and so then I walk up and I'm just like, I don't know like my reaction is gonna be. And then when I walk in, then not only like the weight just got like 10 times, it just 10x it. And then I like see tears. I see, people sitting. I see like this, like all this like sadness. And then I'm just like, in that moment, I was kind of like, I can't be sad. Not saying that I'm not sad, but like I gotta appear strong. You know what I mean? I gotta appear just because like if like losing him and it's like it's unexpected, right? So nobody expects to lose a 23-year-old, and especially when there's no foul play involved. You know what I mean? Like nobody expects to lose a 23-year-old to like a health complication. And so this is what this was. And so it's kind of like everybody's kind of like taken aback and stuff like that. And so I literally like in that snap moment when I stepped through the door, I kind of like made a decision. I was kind of like, well, like through this whole process, they won't see me cry. You know what I mean? And it's not because I didn't want to cry. And it's not because like I wasn't hurt. It was just because that, I just somebody cause like when my papa, like he's the oldest man in our family, essentially is my papa. Whenever like he can't stand on his feet and whenever he can't keep it together, like somebody has to. You know what I mean? Like somebody has to be the rock, and just like looking around, I was like, I didn't see any strength in the room. And I was like, well, I guess I'm it, you know. And so like from that moment, I just that kind of like, I just went into like the constellation mode, the like, everything to be straight. And then it's almost to the point where like I'm handling like the emotional side of it, like in private, or I'm just like, just suppressing it in the scenario where like if they see me cry, then oh crap. Because as I reflect on this question, I think everybody's like looking for a reason not to believe in God.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And so when something like unexpected happens and then you don't see hope, then it's very, very easy to like convince yourself that a God doesn't exist. You know, and so I didn't want like me being the baby brother, me being the youngest, right? Baby bro, me being a baby bro, and me like being so strong in that moment. Like part of it was the hope that like people can see hope through me, just because like I supposed to be repped just as well. And like I love him so much. But if I can just like not, if I can be okay, then I just felt that like or I felt that it'll be okay for everybody else to be okay. And then they'll see that, they'll kind of like see that strength. And so like, so that's the position that I just had to like take. And so that's the position that I took with the family for the family. So I just took one of those emotional uppercuts. And I was just like, I presented myself well every day. So like things like picking out the clothes things like speaking at the eulogy at your big bro's funeral, things like, just like being like the point person, like the decision maker, whatever it is. And it's kind of like, I'm 21 at the time. Like his birthday was May 20th. My birthday's May 26th. And we lost on May 11th. So we lost him like right at the thing. And like part of the decision and like looking back on it, like and I made the decision symbiotically and also on purpose. Like I decided to have like a longer mourning period before we buried him because I didn't want to bury him like just say May 14th, May 15th. And then like a week later, May 20th is his birthday. You know what I mean? And so all of a sudden it's kind of like all these flood of emotions come back in. And so like whenever he passed away, there was kind of like, hey, when should we like, have his things? I was like, well, let's just have it on May 20th. And so then like we can is really like the transition day is like really a day of remembrance. So a celebration day, a celebration of life, a remembrance. And so I remember making that decision and like looking back on it, like would I make it again? I don't know, but like to me that just made the most sense because I didn't want to like I'm I'm so big on like when it happens, you deal with it, you move past it. Like I'm the burn the boats type of guy. You know what I mean? Like we're about to go do this. All right, cool, burn the boats. Let's go do something. You know what I mean? Like this is like where we're at. And so that's kind of the decision that kind of like led me there. And so like dealing with that, like specifically and like in all the, idiosyncrasies there, this like again set me up for like what was to come in the future because like that was like whenever like my best mate Lamont passed away through in a car accident, like I didn't have to deal with the logistics. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And then I didn't have to deal with the logistics. I didn't have to like deal with, yeah, any of that. I just had to like be there for like our friend group, be there to show respect for his parents, and then just kind of like add a perspective, like having him lost because like Lamont, we was like we still bros. We got this silly Facebook, yes, Facebook guys, I'm old. Facebook, like Facebook Messenger thing that we just kind of keep up like constant communication. She's like Facebook, you still use Facebook? Like how old are you? Are you a millennial? Like yeah, you Generation Alpha, get out my face. And but like that friend group, like his bro, like so his blood bro was like and like we're all brothers in a sense, and we're like if I'm hungry, his mother feed me. If I step out of line in front of his parents, they'll get me back in line. And so they're just very like that's how communal that we all grew up. And so fast forward when we're adults, we're still rocking. And but like yeah, so his brother Lance was kind of like, bro, like you're the only person that could understand this. Like, how did you deal with this? You know, and then a lot of things that like I took away from like losing my brother and then also like losing my best friend and the time frame that it did. And I just feel like whatever emotion that you have, that is okay. Like a lot of people think that like they don't supposed to feel sad or they don't supposed to feel indifferent. They don't supposed to feel frustrated. They don't supposed to feel angry. They don't supposed to feel however you feel like however you like naturally express yourself. And I just say like lean into like that natural expression. But then after you like express yourself out naturally, we might need to like give you some tools and resources to like now express yourself more effectively, right? Just because like my natural expression might not be the most effective expression, but we don't want to like minimize like how you naturally feel. And so if you're a person that's like naturally pissed, like be naturally pissed, right? And then after you get through that flood of emotions, here are some tools to kind of help you deal with this effectively. And so they just kind of like that was just always like my advice and like however you feel, like feel it and just like lean into it. And then like when you like once you're done leaning or you're ready to stand back on your own 2 feet, like here's some tools to kind of like help you through. Here's some tools that kind of like help me through this scenario. And so when it got so that was like dealing with my best friend, and which is kind of crazy because like you kind of like future plan. And so you're just kind of like, all right, cool. Like, so when I get married, like my brother gonna be right next to me, you lose him. Cool. When I get married, like my best mate gonna be right next to me, you lose him. So it's just kind of like, like what, like honestly, like it's, and I'm overly blessed. I'm overly blessed for like friendships and friends that are like brotherhood in a sense. Um, now I'm overly blessed in that regard. But then like even now I'm just kind of like, well, maybe I'll just have like a blank space. You know what I mean? Maybe I'll just have like a symbiotic space for like my bro or Lamont there just because like when I dreamed of this life back when I was 17, 18, 19, 20, like they were the people. they were the people there. So now that they aren't here in the physical, like how do I still like respect that or honor that, you know? So that's it. And so when it came, so when it came, whenever I lost my papa first, my grandma second. And I think like with losing them, because with them, it was more so like my mom I already kind of like let you in a little bit, like, as far as like, I call it like emotional maturity. She's like fantastic in a lot of ways, you know what I mean? But like just like in, the color culture, like we don't necessarily like deal with emotions the most effective way. And it could be because like tools and resources, it could because of like wants or want tos, or want nots. It's like of various reasons, but like, like her parents became like her best friends, in a sense. And so like she lost that. And so crap, you know what I mean? And then like now, how can I, like fill in the gap that life just naturally helped me fill in, like losing brothers. They just kind of like just kept giving me like different spirits and like different people to kind of just like help me feel like I'm not alone. But like losing my grandparents, the thought was like, okay, how can I like fill this void from my mom? You know what I mean? Because like, it gets way more difficult to like get friends as you get older. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so like, she's in her 50s, like, all right, cool. So she has like her work association, she has family, and then it's a whole other story. But then again, it's like, not many friends, and then she lost like her best friends, like her father and her mother. You know what I mean? She talks to them all the time throughout the week, like, what I mean, like, don't I'm gonna call you back, Nina's calling, you know what I mean? That type of stuff. And I'm like, all right, cool. So when it got to that point, it was like for me, like dealing with loss, like and losing grandparents is in my mind, like losing in my mind, like the transition of life became part of the life experience, right? Just because for me, like losing somebody you never thought to lose, and then like again having that happen twice, it is kind of like you kind of realize how fragile life is. And so it is almost like really I just got into the scenario that like I'm just gonna like not necessarily like enjoy it while it lasts, because that's like kind of like a morbid way to kind of like, kind of think about like, I mean, well, enjoy it while it lasts. However, I do adopt the principle like smile because it happened, don't cry because it's over. I do try to live by that a ton, just because transitions happen in life. And then this could be a permanent transition, but then like I live in the very, very transient city of Los Angeles. And then like I feel all the feels. And so when people like leave Los Angeles, I'm hurt. You know what I mean? Like that's it affects me for like a day and a half. I'm like, bro, you just left me. You just left me. And I was like always the kid, like I was always the guy that like always left last in college. I just remember like sending all my friends off and then leaving, that type of deal, just because like that transition part, like, I just never was like really good at it. But like now it's kind of like adopting like, oh, I'm really glad that we got this time together. Like if I and this is going to sound very, very like radical, but if I never see you again in my life, you know what I mean? I'm very, very happy that we had this time right here, right now together. And I'm thankful and I'm appreciative of it. So that's typically how like I look, that's the lens that I look at. And so when it got time to like, when there was time to like, my grandparents transition out, like part of the time, like when they're in their like, upper 70s, 80s, like in my mind, that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like life well lived. You know what I mean? But then again, it just kind of like, oh man, I'm so thankful. You know what I mean? There's like a lot of things that my grandma say, or that my grandma said that like I still hold on to for dear life this day. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm so thankful. And so like that's kind of how like I look at like the transition of life now, or just the transition in life. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, yeah, and then not saying that like I'm enthusiastic about it all the time. But then once I recenter myself, it'll definitely be like, oh, cool. Like, I'm glad that happened. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, thank you for that experience. And so that's just kind of how, and I'm not even quite sure I'm sure there's some gold in there. But I'm not quite sure if I effectively answered the question, but I just kind of know that it's something to be extracted from this these large amount of words that I did say. But apologies if I didn't answer the question directly.
No, you did. It's incredible. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to the recording again because I do think there's so many gold nuggets that are in there that you're sharing with our audience. And there's so many things that I want to talk to you about. I wanted to talk to you about your keynote, which is having a healthy relationship with conflict. I think it's incredible. You suffered a stroke at age 34. You later had brain surgery. I mean, that's a total life-changing thing that I think taught you so much about vulnerability and strength. And your healing in terms of your physically healing, mentally healing, and spiritually healing. And now you help other people to discover what their purpose is, which I think is just so incredible. I have so much respect for what it is that you're doing and how much you've been through. I mean, we just scratched the surface and we didn't even get to everything that I want to talk about. But I think you're an incredible human being, and I think you have so much to offer college students. So I really appreciate all of this. For all the college students who, just think the world of you after hearing all of this. I'm wondering, how can they connect with you? How can they follow your journey? How can they learn more about your speaking and your wellness work?
Yeah. My Instagram is D Hardy, Hardy dot IG. And so all new welcome followers are there. The metabolic business that I'm now starting to start servicing is called Optimize VO2. I got really lucky with the digital property, just having my website be the name of the company, Optimize VO2.
Mhm.
And then also the Insta handle for that. And then you can always email me at hello@optimizevo2.com. I can be very, very responsive for there, or just like, in this new age, just slide into the DMs, and I'll be glad to engage and to go back and forth and just kind of be a resource and help in any way possible.
I love it. Darnell, thank you so much for sharing all of this. I wish that we had hours to talk because I know there's so much more behind all of this. So I can't wait for the next time that we get to hang out and I get to find out all the answers to all the other questions that I have. But I do appreciate the time that we spent here together. Thank you for sharing all of this with all of our student listeners. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you. And hey, guys.
All right. So, to our listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation with Darnell, I want you to like this and I want you to share it with everybody that you know on your college campus. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Bye for now.